All right, Aaron Rodgers emerging from the darkness and apparently making some requests, having discussions. The Jets continuing to pursue the four-time MVP, although no deal has officially been done. Rodgers and the Jets have discussed some of his preferences when it comes to free agents. In our NFL Insider, Josina Anderson reporting that the Jets are discussing with Rodgers and his input and taking that into account with regard to free agents. Tweeting out in part here, my understanding has also been since last week, whether acknowledged or not, that the Jets were going to take QB Aaron Rodgers' input into free agent targets into account, and 12 was keenly made aware of that too. And we have Josina Anderson with us here on HQ alongside Brady Quinn in studio to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Not only that, but also just the craziness that has been free agency. But of course, we're going to kick things off starting about Aaron Rodgers, or starting with him, I should say. Josina, we just saw your tweet there. What can you tell us about the discussions that Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are reportedly having?
So I'm literally getting a call that I would love to take right now, but I cannot take. So if you just give me 1 second, hold on 1 sec. I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. Give me 3 seconds. Okay, thanks. Okay, so to go back to what you were saying, if you could just reset me so I can make sure I enter into the discussion properly.
Yes, so Josina, we know you're a busy woman here taking calls, but just when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, we've seen there are some discussions that they've been having. What can you tell us about that?
All right, so we know that the Jets contingent went to Aaron Rodgers' house, and they obviously met with him, did their pitch and all that other stuff, something that they should be doing when they're looking to fulfill the objectives that we know that they have, which is to address QB1 and their willingness to do whatever it takes to make sure that they have that position addressed. And of course, in the midst of that conversation, right, you're going to have discussions, at least per what my sources told me, even up to last week, with regards to free agents and things like that. Now, I know that there's a report out there about a specific wish list and a list and all these other things. I'm not going as far as to say that there was a list, or what have you. But of course, there's going to be conversations about what the team intends to do, particularly when you have a quarterback of that caliber. The mere fact that the team is even having discussions with Allen Lazard, I think, is an indication of that. You would wonder how much there would be, conversations with respect to that particular free agent if Aaron Rodgers wasn't in the discussion. But one thing I also want to note, too, just with my conversations today, because I know I had tweeted that I felt like the Jets were anxiously calm yesterday. And today I feel like, I don't know, they're even more calmer. I don't feel the same anxiety just based off the discussions that I'm having today. But of course, that's going to be, a part of the discussions. And the other thing that I added in that tweet is that it's not just singled down to players that Aaron Rodgers has played with before. And the other thing that I can just really quickly add to that as well is, with the discussions, particularly around the wide receiver position, people have been wondering about Elijah Moore. One, because of the context of the upgrading of wide receivers, which, potentially may go through, obviously, stuff to execute negotiations and deals. But it even goes back to, I think, about around week 9, it was going into the bye as to what was going on with Elijah and some of, the disharmony that was happening at the time between he and the team. But I was expressly told today that, at least from the team's perspective, that there are no desires to trade Elijah Moore. And also, I've talked to wide receiver prospects out there who would even want it to be the case for Elijah to still be there. It's just really a acknowledgement of the talent that he has. So, we'll see what happens. Obviously, all these things are always fluid, and a player has their own ability to react to whatever moves may or may not happen in the future. But at least from the team's perspective now, that's what's the case.
Well, I'm not sure why anyone's surprised, though, that this would be the case for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he did this back during his time with Green Bay, wanting to surround himself with guys that he felt comfortable with, guys that he's played with before, and he feels like could help maximize his talent and ability. That was one of the biggest gripes in talking to Brian Gutekunst and really their front office, is not being more a part of it moving forward. And he got that done for at least his final couple years there. However, now when he's looking at a new venture, you'd have to think that he's looking at the Jets saying, okay, I don't know you quite the same way I knew the Green Bay Packers organization. And even though you have Nathaniel Hackett there, who I feel very comfortable with, I know the system walking into it, I need to make sure you've got some of the players that I would like to play with moving forward signed up before I'm all in on all this. So it makes sense. Obviously, he's at the end of his career. He's had a tremendous legacy throughout the NFL. If he's going to make this move, I think, and really differentiate himself from another Hall of Famer in Brett Favre, I think he'd like it to work out and not necessarily end the way it did with Brett Favre with the New York Jets, which they were successful. However, at the end of the day, they weren't able to get ultimately to a Super Bowl and have the success that I think people thought they were going to have going into it.
Yeah, we heard, Robert Saleh in the offseason saying we're committed to finding, or at the start of the offseason.
Well, Woody Johnson, their owner, said it, really.
Yeah, we're committed to finding, a veteran QB, although no deal has been done. If they do get a deal done with Aaron Rodgers, Josina, you have to wonder, what are the impacts of this? Where does it leave, say, a Zach Wilson with that organization?
Well, one thing I definitely know from my multiple conversations with sources is that the ethos has always been that as long as a player is in a Jets uniform, I'm laughing as I say this because I can't think of how many times I've heard this, but it's true. As long as a player is in a Jets uniform, the organization is going to do all it can to continue to improve that player, work with that player, or do whatever they feel it takes for, that player to progress. Zach Wilson is not different from any other player on that roster and or just around the league when it comes to having to compete for your position. But at the same time, we know that particularly with head coaches and staffs that are not tenured, like and what I mean by that is like been there for a long time, like a Harbaugh, like a Tomlin, or what have you, you got to get in there and make your mark as far as improvement pretty quickly, and especially when you consider the context of the Jets and not having I guess achieve the goals that they're looking to achieve, and that fan base being really rabid and things like that. So absolutely, the impact of that is that you have a QB1 potentially, presumably, hopefully coming in there and having an immediate impact on hopefully the trajectory of the team, the confidence of the team, how they relate to the players. You saw how Garrett Wilson was on Twitter just the other day when they thought that something was done because, actually they were reacting to Dov Kleiman's tweet, which they didn't understand. He was summarizing somebody else, but they thought it was done in the reaction that was going on with him and Breece Hall. So you're already seeing it from that, let alone adding other wide receiver pieces or whatever pieces to make this team even more formidable. Take a look at what the Dolphins are doing. They're already reacting in improving their secondary to perceive things that may or may not happen with the Jets that they hope to happen. So that's the impact.
Well, in regards to Zach Wilson, I think he would be best suited, probably the Jets would be best suited if they were to trade him now and allow him to have a fresh start somewhere else and move on. The reality is, if you're getting Aaron Rodgers to come in and play, if things go the way that you hope they do, you're not going to be playing Zach Wilson. And I'm a believer as a former quarterback in the NFL that you need the reps. He needs the reps especially. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes the Jets made this past year was benching them and not allowing him to work through some of the struggles and the adversity he was going through to allow him to build up and see what he's capable of by the end of the season. So unfortunately for me, when I look at this and you think about where Zach Wilson is in his rookie contract, after this upcoming season, if both Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson are there, they're going to have to make a decision on his fifth-year option. And the reality is now when you pick that up, it's fully guaranteed. And the problem with that is he's got to be able to move on, have a fresh start somewhere else, allow him to have a shot to help impact another organization. He's talented enough, but I don't think sitting on the bench is going to help him unless Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, and that's obviously not, I don't think, what the Jets really want to happen in this case.
All right, Josina, you wanted to say something regarding Zach Wilson?
No, I was just saying that, I think what Brady is saying is true from the standpoint it would always be nice for a prospect to have as many snaps as possible. What I think is interesting is that even Aaron Rodgers had to wait his turn behind, Brett Favre. And I go back to that Thursday night game that the Jets had against the Jaguars where to me at least, Zach Wilson at the time, not to say he can't get better, looked almost like he was really caught like a deer in headlights. And I do think sometimes it is worth a player, quarterback or not, just taking a beat and regrouping. And I remember Robert Saleh saying at that time that he just needs to take some time, just even away from football, and hopefully eventually getting back to that. But yes, to me, there's nothing wrong with having to compete.
Well, they're not competing, and the bottom line is Aaron Rodgers is going to be the guy. So that's the reality of it.
True.
He needs a fresh start. I mean, bottom line is he needs a fresh start to be able to get away from a fan base that I think at one point in time before the season was clamoring for him. He was the guy. They were talking about all the stuff he was doing off the field and how talented he is. By the end of the season, they were done with him, and they wanted Mike White. I mean, Mike White was more of the kind of the quarterback hero, if you will, and obviously gave their offense a bit of a lift too. So I just think it'd be better right now to move on from him, get what you can, give another team an opportunity to have him under his rookie deal for 2 more years, and at least another year before they can then make the decision on the 5th-year option. I think it'd be in best interest of really of both parties.
Yeah, and we'll just have to wait and see, continue to wait and see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. Of course, you can't talk about free agency without talking about Lamar Jackson, that whole situation. Thanks to the non-exclusive tag, some social media, we're starting to get a little peek behind the curtain of negotiations with Lamar and Baltimore. Lamar tweeting this out, saying that he turned down a 3-year, $133 million fully guaranteed offer from the Ravens. And Brady, we don't really know if this is part of a larger deal or the logistics exactly. We're just going off of this tweet, but interesting nonetheless to see this coming from Lamar.
Yeah, and look, the reality is at this point, you look at the average annual value there, you're about $44.3 million, which puts him up there amongst the tops in the NFL. And I understand he probably wants to reset the market. He's looking at surpassing the Deshaun Watson deal. The reality is he hasn't finished the season healthy either the past 2 seasons. The passing from the pocket has been a problem for him, even though he's won an MVP earlier in his career and he's been a dynamic player. A 3-year fully guaranteed deal of $133 million for the style in which he plays, that's a heck of an offer. I'm surprised he wasn't able to go with it. Maybe he thinks there's more out there. Now we're going to find out. He's under the non-exclusive franchise tag. Another team has a chance to provide an offer sheet, and we'll see if he can surpass that. He may have a hard time finding that out there in the market for him. Given this year's draft class, we got 4 guys potentially that could go in the first round, and you've already heard a number of teams who said they're out. They're focused on other prospects. Whether that should be the case or not, I think Atlanta should definitely be on Lamar Jackson. I have no idea what they're doing, and I understand Taylor Heineke's going to be a part of that, but that's a team that could use his talent. So it's a bit surprising, but he may find it hard-pressed that any team is going to provide him something better than that, or at least than what Baltimore's offered so far.
Right.
So I would just say this, with the tweet that Lamar Jackson put out there, at least the response, my first instinct to that is I need more context to that tweet, because I don't know that it fully means everything that he's saying or all that what he means by putting out there. So that's the first thing that comes to me, because I would want to know, is that an indication of the last thing, the only thing, like what is all of that? And just based on some of the reactions I'm getting from that tweet, per sources, I just think that I need to get more context, and hopefully I get that after, this hit. And I would have loved to have had that input coming into this hit. But the other thing that kind of comes to my mind with regards to the number on the term in front of that 133, which is the 3-year, it did bring me back to a conversation that I had with sources around the combine time with regards to the shorter term. And it makes me think of the debate that was happening in the NBA at the time. LeBron James was taking shorter deals and Carmelo Anthony was taking those longer 5-year deals. And one of the things that was said to me in a conversation was, and I still need more context to this, but what was said was you can't necessarily have a shorter deal and then be asking for more, money. I think one of the things that the person was trying to get across to me is that when you're trying to execute certain key metrics in a contract, there's always give and take. So if you're having a shorter term, deal, which is presumably what more athletes would want, just to explain that, so you have more bites at the apple, then maybe you don't get to have this record-setting APY on the average, or what other key metrics that people look at as far as cash flow and things like that. So this potentially could add some, context to, why that number is below a Patrick Mahomes and all the other quarterbacks we saw in that graphic that is above that in comparison to the term. But again, I need a little bit more context to kind of understand all of that, because I would be very shocked that that number would be at 44 and below Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson, despite the fact that it's fully guaranteed. Something seems off about that with me, and I suspect that that's what, the conversation I'm going to have, about that, this with. But I just need more context. I need more context.
That's the thing that's interesting about this. If indeed this was the offer that was portrayed out there, you have to understand both sides of this. If you're the player, especially for a player of his skill set and talents, he takes off runs more. We've talked about the past couple of years of being injured. The team's saying, look, we want you to show out for the next 3 years. We're willing to guarantee you that. Most teams aren't willing to give more than 3 years in a contract anyways. So even if it's a 5-year deal, the team's on the hook for the first 3. The back end 2, they're probably not on the hook for anything as far as the guaranteed money that's involved. So that setup, it's not the fact that it's a short-term deal. It's the fact that if it was indeed fully guaranteed, that's not a bad deal. And if you're Lamar Jackson, maybe you take that now and you say, I'm going to go show you the next 2 years. And then once I'm 1 year out again from my, the end of this contract, I'm going to make you re-up again. Josina made a great point talking about players want to have as many bites of the apple as possible. This would give him that opportunity to do so while banking on the fact he's going to get $133 million or $44.3 million per year, which may not break what Patrick Mahomes is getting paid. But the reality is no one should be getting paid more than Patrick Mahomes. Now, that's not how the economics of the NFL works. The next guy up is always the guy who's going to break that record. But not all ownerships and organizations are created the same. Some of them don't have the financial, withdrawal to be able to, pay out that sort of cash that they need in order to equate to one of those bigger deals.
And Jeremy St. Louis said it best. It's the offseason, but not really, because things just keep on happening. We keep getting more news. Brady Quinn, Josina Anderson joining us here on HQ to talk about Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, something we'll certainly keep an eye on here on HQ. And for more on everything happening in this crazy free agency, make sure you tune in to the Pick Six podcast. In the very latest episode, Will Brinson, John Breach, they're giving you a free agency recap, talking about Jesse Bates going to the Falcons, Jimmy G to the Raiders, and so much more. You can download and listen wherever you get your podcasts, or you can scan that QR code.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.